Welcome to the Fleet Geeks Podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
There we go. Red light is rolling. Let's what we're doing this week then, Pete.
So I've set this podcast up as how to manage your maintenance providers.
Wow, how to manage your maintenance.
How
to merge your cats would probably be a better title, wouldn't it? Or how to push your water up a hill.
Yeah, something like that. How to shovel shit uphill. I don't know about you, but I feel like all the maintenance providers that are worth their salt are really busy at the minute, and it's almost like they're getting to pick work. That's how I feel. You know what?
I got told a really funny, well, not funny actually, not at all. I got told a really horrendous story a little while ago actually by a delegate on a course, and he said he texted me or WhatsApped me or whatever a few weeks later and said, "Hey Mike," he said, "you'll never believe this." He said, "I've just been sacked by my maintenance provider." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, I think it was actually, to be fair, it was during the COVID kind of thing. So he said, "Yeah," he said, "I've got a letter from a maintenance provider saying, basically, we don't want you anymore." So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a combination of them not being able to get enough staff. I think a shortage of fitters into the world, and just plenty of work. And I think they can pick and choose what they do. So I think we're probably coming at this from a point of view that we both had our feet in the camp, but maybe different sides. I think,
yeah, definitely. I think it's really tricky for. I think if we start with maintenance providers initially, just sort of paint a picture, I guess, from their point of view, and that is the shortage of drivers is well documented, but what isn't so well documented is there's a real shortage of skilled labour in the maintenance market, in the maintenance provider market, and I think that sort of bears a real challenge, and I think it enables. So I think a lot of maintenance providers are focused on their margins, and I think they're focused on working with the people they want to work with, because actually it can be very tricky in a maintenance provider market to work with people who are late payers, because ultimately you've got to buy parts, you've got to buy the labour, and then if you've got people who are bad payers, that's tricky. And it's a little bit like survival of the fittest, because a maintenance provider is often keen to work with bigger operators, because ultimately if they're working with smaller operators and smaller accounts teams, it's much harder for them, because whilst I think whilst it may diversify their business more, actually there's a lot of incentive in there for them to work with bigger operators, because it's just a lot leaner for them. It's a lot easier. They deal with one person for a whole range of vehicles. It's one accounts department, one big invoice. There's some real big benefits for them. So I think a lot of the time small operators are getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah, I mean that's I think essentially from that anecdote there. This guy, he only has a few vehicles, and it was a case of we've got to put these meager resources have got to go somewhere, and unfortunately they can't go with you, Mr. Small Operator. So, and I think you make a good point there, Pete, about we have to look. I think we can sometimes look at this from the point of view of an operator, and we're quite often as operators left frustrated by our maintenance provider, not doing what they should be doing, and slow to respond, and long lead times, etc. But I think when you do look at the problem from the other side of the fence, there are one or two other things we have to consider. And I never really gave it much consideration in terms of margin, but I can imagine the margins must be. You know more about this than I do from being from that side of the fence, but the margins on that kind of operation with the cost centres, the costs that are involved with labour and with. I remember buying a dongle once for some MAN trucks, up to some diagnostic, $2,500. everybody's got to buy this kit, and it's just so expensive. I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I think the overheads, I'd love to run workshops as an independent. I'd love to start flagship garages, and we'd be out there being the golden maintenance provider for people. And I've had my good mate Michael Ambrosio on the podcast a half dozen things from M&N Vehicle Services in Peterborough, and he runs a Sterling workshop, but he can afford to be fussy over who he works with. But I think it's not easy. It's not easy to be profitable as a workshop. It's not easy to be profitable. There's a lot of costs. Technicians are very expensive, and it's very, very competitive marketplace for the best technicians. They're getting paid some really strong money.
Well, I suppose they could go out driving if they, that's the.
And that's exactly the issue. A lot of them have got licenses, so a lot of them can go out driving, which is an easier job. And I'm not, I might get lambasted, but say again, sorry.
Controversial,
a little bit controversial, but I would argue, I'll put my hand on my chest. I think being a workshop technician, prepping vehicles for MOT, repairing, diagnosing, carrying out maintenance, I think is a tougher job than the majority of driving jobs.
Yeah,
I think it's a tougher job. I think there's a lot more responsibility. I think there's a lot of responsibility on maintenance technicians, and absolutely when drivers are getting paid the money they're getting paid, what should maintenance technicians be getting paid? It's a very skilled job, and it's not easy. So there's all those costs. There's the cost of running all the equipment and maintaining all the equipment in the workshop. Margins on parts and bits and pieces aren't really what they used to be. No. So it's a tricky gig, much like running an HGV operation. It's a tricky gig, and they've got to be selective over who they work with. I think that will it's gonna be a challenge for. I think the issue is for smaller operators is that they don't have much leverage. I was writing an article on this very subject, which is one of the reasons I suggested it. I was writing an article on this very subject this weekend, and I think one of the issues is that smaller operators just won't have the leverage with a maintenance provider to get the level of service they need, and I think that's kind of a tricky situation to be in, because all of the onus and all of the responsibility for the upkeep and maintenance of a fleet and the standard of maintenance is on the transport manager and on the operator. The duty of care is theirs, and not the maintenance provider. So to an extent, maintenance providers, if they're swamped with work, can go, well, you like it or lump it, off you go.
Yeah, basically,
it's literally, well, suck it up, buttercup, or go and pick somewhere else to go. And that leaves operators in a bit of a sticky situation.
Yeah, it's a bit of a queer pitch. So as an operator then, Pete, how would it be? How would a small operator, how would they best be placed to start those negotiations or start that chat off with a potential maintenance provider? What sort of questions should they be asking people?
Yeah, so there's lots of things that when I was sort of writing the article, I was thinking about what how to start the ball rolling, and certainly the straightforward ones when selecting a maintenance provider is an operator wants to be looking for qualified technicians. So what level are they qualified to? NVQ level 3 or above in heavy vehicle maintenance. Are they ERTEC, and do they maintain their ERTECs? That's a 5-yearly cycle to ensure that people are sort of kept up to date. What is the capability from, if it's an independent workshop, what's their capability with regards to diagnosis of the more modern vehicles? Are they able to sort of diagnose faults and sort of do those? And then it's on to like, how do they maintain their equipment? How do they operate? So, are the brake testers calibrated? Are the headlight testers calibrated? When is their capacity? Because this is one of the things sort of when I chat to Michael, I say to him, I might have a potential customer for you, and he's like, well, when are they looking to have their vehicle serviced? Because the workshop space at a weekend or on a Friday night is at a premium because that's when everyone wants it. The demand's really high. Whereas actually during the weekdays and things like that, if people can work with that, the demand's reduced. So, but yeah, it's kind of, are we compatible in the way, are we compatible as an operator and as a maintenance provider in the timing and the scheduling of when we need work to be carried out? Big question. How do you manage your MOTs? How important is MOT first time pass rate to you? How do you manage those? Do you have your own tachograph calibration center? If not, who do you use? How do you know the people that are doing it are qualified? There's a myriad of questions. And then that's without, we were talking about this the other day as part of the Fleet Geeks peer-to-peer group. The next set of questions is around sorting out a service level agreement as well.
Yeah.
So do you think I've covered everything that you?
I mean,
that's fairly comprehensive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think those are the questions that you should be asking. But I guess my challenge would be, how does a non-technical person, which let's face it, a transport manager doesn't have to be a good transport manager. You don't have to be. We've had this discussion many times about and on this very podcast about does a transport manager have to be a driver? You can say transport manager's got to be a driver. You could argue that a transport manager would have to be a fitter as well as an accountant, as well as all the many other things. So,
hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
There are many good transport managers out there that are non-technical. How should they approach the conversation? And I suppose that's another conversation for another day in terms of I suppose it comes down to the confidence and down to communication skills. But how should they approach that?
Yeah, it is, and that's a really good question. I think that it's that needs some reflecting on for transport managers who haven't got the technical expertise of understanding how a workshop works or what maintenance is carried out. Because I guess you could even go back to the question of like, what does your 6 weekly inspection look like? What items are you checking? Because essentially that's negotiable as well. Don't automatically. What I'd say to transport managers, don't automatically accept what maintenance providers suggest is a 6 weekly check. It's a bit like a daily walk around check. You dictate what should be on that daily walk around check in the same way that you need to ensure that the 6 weekly inspection is carried out thoroughly. But yeah, so how does someone who's not technical approach these conversations? I imagine it's pretty daunting, actually. I imagine it's pretty daunting, and I imagine they feel like equivalent to little old Dot, who's got her mini Metro that hasn't, that has no idea from one end of the vehicle to another, that will take it in and get told that she's got some rust patches and she needs some tartan paint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
or oh no, your reach around's broken or whatever, and we need to get it fixed. It's tricky, isn't it? Right?
I mean, that's right.
And then you got to like own the show, haven't you? You've got to, when it comes to like defect management and defect rectification, you've got to know what's a safety related defect and what isn't. And I tell you what, you've got to be able to trust your maintenance provider, particularly if you're not technical, that you've got a lot of, you've got to be able to manage that relationship properly.
And I guess one of the offshoots of it being a very busy kind of place at the moment is that you're not going to get so much maintenance providers inventing work because they just haven't got the capacity to do that invented work anyway. So it's the same with plumbers. When a plumber comes around now, it's so difficult to get a plumber. Actually, I kind of think, well, they're not going to invent stuff. They're just going to fix what they need to fix and get on to the next job because they haven't got time to mess about, inventing jobs that need doing. So there's that element to it. But, there is that sort of mysterious mystique. But you're absolutely right. I mean, six weekly. Nobody has to do 6 weeks. You don't have to do 6 weekly inspections. Like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, couldn't they? But it must be. So in terms of a service level agreement, MP, what kind of things should people be looking for in terms of a service level agreement? How demanding can they be in the current market?
And this is exactly the point. It's really a case of don't necessarily listen to Pete on the Fleet Geeks podcast, because you can push your luck as much as you can push your luck. And I think it will depend on the relationship you can build with the maintenance provider and what their position is and what your position is. But ultimately, with the service level agreement, you want to be looking at, these are the things that are going to be inspected 6 weekly or 12 weekly or whatever. The charge rate is going to be this. How they agree what hours they're going to charge. Is it going to be based on the hours that the technician takes, or is it going to be based on some kind of timed amount that the manufacturer says it should take to do a job?
Yeah.
Because often how long, and I suppose this is something for people who haven't really got the workshop knowledge, is that essentially every job, whether you replace a filter or whether you change brake linings or what have you, calipers, it's all got a time that's set by the manufacturer. The manufacturer will say, right, these brake relines are 2 hours work, or brake calipers 4 hours. But is the workshop going to charge you what the manufacturer says the time is, or is it going to be the time? Yeah. And one technician might be able to do that job in 3 hours, and another one, it might take a whole day. So how do you know what that's going to be and what the charge rate's going to be? So that's certainly one of the service level discussions. Another would be around how long do they want the vehicles to prepare for MOT? And then what is the process around the MOT? Do they book it in? Do you book it in? Do they take it for you? Do you take it? Are they going to make sure that the tachograph never runs out? So, when it comes to calibration, are they looking to make sure that it gets recalibrated within the 6 weeks, or are you going to run it till the last day, whether that's when it's in for inspection or not? There's lots of things around that. Parts. A good example is, what's the automatic sign-off for spend on defect repairs? So, for example, it really works well to say, particularly if you have overnight servicing, it's good to be able to say, right, if we've got a safety-related defect, you're authorised up to, 500 quid. Yeah. Anything over and above 500 quid, you need to get some level of authorisation for. But up to that, I'm happy for you to have an open checkbook. It's those kinds of agreements, because the less friction, the more trust you can have, and the less friction, the easier the relationship's going to be. As long as there is trust and the less friction. But as long as the workshop technicians have got to know what the agreement is. And one of the big ones, having spoken to having the conversation we had last week with the peer-to-peer group, how quickly are we going to get the service documentation? How quickly? How quickly are we going to see that service documentation? Because I tell you what, it ain't no good it coming 3 weeks later in the post.
Nope. And it's no good telling the DVSA when they come visiting for an inspection visit that it is in the where's all your maintenance that's good, apart from there's some missing records. Where are they? Oh, they're in the post. We haven't got them back from the maintenance provider yet. So absolutely. But again, I think this is all really gives some value to that other skill that a transport manager's got to have in terms of influencing communication. We're not maybe going to negotiate the best deal, right down to the last pound, shilling and pence with a maintenance provider. But given the importance of finding a good maintenance provider, I think the skill in negotiation doesn't come down to how much you can wring out of them. It comes down to how efficiently can that operation work. And you mentioned there about the night time and the weekends. If you can get, I've done this before, and I've done this practically, where we've kept a spare vehicle rather than run it to the wire. We've kept a spare vehicle because it was just so much cheaper to get the stuff serviced during the week. So that's something people really do need to consider, because if you're running it to the wire and you need your vehicles serviced at the weekends or in the evenings, then you're going to pay a lot more for your maintenance.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and also, you know, is that part of that SLA agreement? It absolutely, like you say, is when are you going to pull my vehicle out of the workshop that you're working on to prioritise one of your more important customers? When does that going to happen, and who are the customers? Because they're the things that they go on. Those things go on at the sharp end. You know, and it's really how much of a priority is your work. And like you say, there is a massive saving to be negotiated potentially if you can fit in around where the capacity is, because you're kind of in that sweet spot. And the negotiation, like you say, is far more complex than going, right, the hourly rate's going to be £100 an hour or £45 an hour, which I think is what I think a lot of the time that's what the conversation is going to be. Right, you're going to service these vehicles and we're going to pay £45 an hour or £100 an hour. The thing is the workshop, essentially they have what's called a recovery rate, which is the average hourly rate that they recover from a job. And that recovery rate isn't just what the hourly rate is charged to the client. It's also how efficient the technicians are at carrying out the job. And ultimately that workshop are going to have a target recovery rate. And if you negotiate under what that recovery rate is going to be, all they're going to do is start bumping the hours up on your job to make the number they want. So I think probably the food for thought for people is don't necessarily focus on what that hourly rate is. Obviously have a negotiation, but actually there's a lot more stuff to it, isn't there? There's a lot more stuff and give and take and negotiation and influence and that kind of thing. It's a bit of a complex negotiation.
Massive subject. I think, you know, we've probably not going to do it justice in the time that we've given for this podcast. And there's like all these podcasts so far, we start off with a subject and we think, what are we going to do with that? And then you realise how in depth it is. And having negotiated a contract with a maintenance provider myself, and been quite pleased with the outcome, it is, you know, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. We've got to think about parts, and we've got to think about, you know, what kind of deal are we going to do with the parts? Are we happy to just take whatever they say, or are we going to have an open book with its plus 15, 10%, whatever it is for the parts? There's just so much in that. And again, by negotiating a better deal that way, I think you're probably, by being more generous with your parts budget, you're gonna save money elsewhere, because they can see being squeezed. You know, they don't want to be squeezed in both directions. They don't want being squeezed in one direction, but they don't want to be squeezed in both directions. So
absolutely,
got to work.
It's got, like with anything, it's got to work for both parties, doesn't it? Otherwise, the service is going to falter. And I think one of the little bits of advice, just whilst I think about it, is be the operator. Be the operator that the maintenance provider want to do business with. I.e., be that vehicle that gets parked in their yard that actually they can gloat about the customer base they've got to their other customers, or helps them win business. If you're that exemplary operator whose vehicles look beautiful all the time, and you know that essentially people will be proud to do business with you, that's the way to get the best service. Yeah, I would say.
As we know, and you know, people buy from people, and I think everybody understands the rationale behind that. That if you make a good relationship with somebody, that you can, it's easier to sell to them. But I think if you look at it from the other side of the coin, it's something that held me in good stead when I was working for the local authority. Lots of people don't like dealing with local authorities. Yes, they're good payers. There's no two ways about that. They'll get the money in 14 days in most cases, but people don't like the red tape. But I found that people would sell to people, and if you it's not just a question of people buying from people; it's people selling to people. And if you can make yourself attractive as a customer, then I think you're going to get a better deal at the end of the day. That sounds a bit counterintuitive to those people who think they're hard, sharp negotiators, but at the end of the day, we're in a market where we need to be on top of that, aren't we? That's the thing.
Yeah, it's a very complex marketplace. I think it's a very complex marketplace. So yeah, should we sign that one off there, mate?
I think so, but I think we'll hopefully let's get to, hopefully people will come back to us with this and give us your thoughts, give us your experiences. It's fascinating, and we always say that we're never We never turn these into sales pitches, but nevertheless, I think certainly it's something that somebody who was inexperienced in this area would certainly do, a great deal of good for themselves if they invested a little bit of time and effort and maybe even their hard-earned in speaking to us if they need to, or somebody like us if they need that.
Absolutely. Fantastic, Mike. Thank you very much, mate. And we'll see you on the next one, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it, and please do share it. Yeah, see you in a bit. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.